Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our online series, at which we feature showcases of the sustainable business models of YesS members. Today, we have the pleasure of introducing to you Tetra Pak's strategic approach to sustainability with two distinguished guests, Mr. Mustan Lalani, who is the Global Director of Environment Policy, and Mr. Volkan Aydeniz, who is the Sustainability Director for the Middle East and Africa. Thank you very much for being with us, Mustan, Volkan.
Thank you for having us. It's a pleasure for us.
We
Really.
are delighted to have both of
Thank
you
you.
with us on the stream. Thank you. We are going through a time of awakening, if I may say, and now we are realizing that what is good for the planet is also good for our economies in our green agenda that everyone is working so hard on. The governments, all of our members, all NGOs, it is a hot topic lately. And even when we are exiting from the effect of the COVID, like we sense that this agenda is escalating, and the time is ticking also for introducing new practices to decrease our carbon print. And again, it's a pleasure for us to say that it's a tough issue that we are focusing on with our all wider network. And when we dig into this, we often see that many international companies have already pledged themselves to develop sustainable solutions for the enormous societal challenges that the world is faced with. And we are proud to witness that our members are at the very center of these global efforts. And I'm both proud and grateful that YESED is actually one of the most consulted stakeholders by the policymakers in reference to matters concerning Turkey's long term strategies for greening the economy and, of course, fostering eco friendly and impact driven business climate. And Mustan, thank you for joining us today. Tetra Pak is one of the leading companies in the use of renewable and recycled materials, and we all know that you are very keen on cutting down the food waste and supporting the rural communities that depend on agriculture, starting from the grassroots level, reflecting your company's promise, protecting what is good, food, people, and planet. I took the liberty of giving out a brief overview of the invaluable work you are doing, but there is more to that. And with this short introduction, I'd like to suffice and hand the word over to you.
Thanks so much, Serkan, and it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you very much for the invitation. And as you mentioned, I think an honor to be participating in this forum and in this platform to maybe share a little bit about our sustainability journey at Tetra Pak, but also some of the key challenges we have going forward. There are going to be quite a few that we would like you need to overcome, and we need partnerships to do that, Serkan. And
Mhm.
so putting together this forum like you have, I think, is an incredible first step for helping us along that journey. So thank you for
Thank you
that.
very much. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Maybe just to start, there we are, the slides. Thank you. We assembled together, Volkan and I, a set of slides here, maybe just to give a little bit of a background into who Tetra Pak is from a sustainability perspective and what has been sort of our core agenda from a sustainability perspective. And it all starts in our purpose on the next slide, which is we commit as a company to making food safe and available everywhere. And our promise as a company is to protect what's good, as Serkan mentioned, protecting food, people, and the planet. Our founder, Ruben Rausing, a Swedish man, started Tetra Pak 20 years ago to this date. And he firmly believed that a package should save more than it costs. And
Mhm.
today, that motto means a lot more than it did back 70 years ago, when it was really about how we can package food, how it can be transported and made available to consumers everywhere in the world. Today, when we think back to what Ruben Rausing was saying, that a package should save more than it costs, it also applies to our sustainability agenda. We want to be doing more good than harm to the environment and to society in general. And so for us, sustainability is, of course, not a new trend. It was really in the core of what our founder, Ruben Rausing, said 70 years ago. We've been reporting our environmental performance since 1999, and we've been reporting on our broader sustainability issues since 2005. So we're not sort of new to the sustainability space here. If you maybe move to the next slide, please. The next one, sorry. Our approach to sustainability is really geared on these three pillars on food, people, and planet. And so we approach sustainability with the focus, of course, on our own operations as a company, on our products and services, but more importantly, we're now focusing on our value chain and how we as a company can make a meaningful impact both upstream with our supply chain and downstream with our customers, with consumers, and with our industry partners. And I think that's really where we see the biggest opportunity to make a meaningful impact. But if we maybe just to take a step back and start with some of the challenges that we've been dealing with and that we see from a macro perspective, and you can see that on the next slide, where today food systems are really at an unbalance. They're unsustainable, and in many cases, they're not really geared for what we need to do to make resilient systems. So what you see on the next slide is that more than 690 people are going to bed hungry every single day. There's environmental impact really caused by climate change, water scarcity, soil erosion, hurricanes, etc., which are obviously having impacts on our supply chain. There is, of course, a growing population, and as we look to 2050, we expect that to reach 9.6 billion people. And so, there's more hungry mouths in the world as well. There's rising global hunger. There's an incredible amount of food loss and waste. And then, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic has only further exacerbated the issues on our food supply chains and the food systems that need to obviously be more resilient to be able to handle such crisis and shocks to the system. And then, some of the insights we have today, approximately in the next slide, approximately 8% of total greenhouse gas emissions are accounted for by food waste and loss. So 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And we know that sort of 26% of global greenhouse gas emissions are accounted for by the global food system. So almost 1/3 of all greenhouse gas emissions comes from the food systems. And so we see this as one of the primary areas where Tetra Pak can play a meaningful role in helping to decarbonize food systems. Maybe just a pause for a second. Are the slides moving?
Yeah, we need to see the next slide. You were talking about the next one about the emissions, right? If we may just check it. Yeah, that one was the one you were talking about. Yeah.
And if you could move maybe now two more. Yes, thank you so much. Just so and I'll be better at telling you when to switch them. My apologies. So on the next slide, when we think about what does it take now to help to decarbonize food systems, we at Tetra Pak have set a very ambitious agenda. Firstly, we have commitments related to climate action. Our first one is to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions across the value chain by 2050. So this would include all three scopes 1, 2, and then 3, which is our broader value chain. And this is aligned very closely with the Science Based Targets Initiative. And we were one of the first companies in the food to actually have a science-based targets approved for our greenhouse gas emissions reduction target. But of course, 2050 is a long way away. And so to reach this, we are working towards almost a 50% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions across our value chain by 2030, in line again with the 1.5 degrees science-based targets commitment, with the baseline from 2019. And to do this, we need to basically reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions across our own operations by 2030 in scopes 1 and 2, which would obviously include business travel as well. And in order to get there, we have also set commitments on using renewable electricity. So in line with the RE100 commitment to achieve 100% renewable electricity in our own operations by 2030. And if you look at this in general, this sort of frames our engagement on the food systems work and really sets the ambition high for what we believe we need to do to really make a meaningful impact when it comes to climate change. And if you go to the next slide, please, if you look at our history on this, we have essentially exceeded all of our previous ambitions and targets up until the last one in 2020. More so than just setting ambitions, we have been actually getting there and working on this very systematically right from the first one we set in 2005. So, for example, here what you see, we outperformed our 2020 climate goal, which was to cap our 2020 impact across the value chain at 2010 levels. And we did this while continuing to expand and grow the business as we look to 2020. So we were able to do more with less from an energy perspective. And in 2020, our value chain greenhouse gas emissions were 19% lower than our baseline in 2010. And so, how if you click to the next slide, how are we really? If you think about how we're actually achieving this, I think we've gone a little bit further on the slides.
It's reacting faster than we click, I guess. Okay.
Okay. Well, whatever. I think I could just go without needing too much of the slides. If I could just maybe tell the story. So how are we? This really requires this broad ambition to get to net greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 across the value chain really requires a broad set of work and key focus areas. And those are really related to a couple things. One, we need to partner and start and really create new partnerships across the value chain, and not only with our suppliers, but also stakeholders downstream. We need to also really work on developing sustainable recycling value chains, and Volkan will talk a little bit more about what we're doing specifically in Turkey and in other parts of the Middle East and Africa region. And we also need to really consider new investments and technologies that are going to really help us get there. So I think that's really the focus for Tetra Pak when it comes to our emissions. And maybe just to put this in perspective, we mapped our value chain emissions across the value chain and if you look at where we need to make the biggest impact comes upstream from our raw materials and transportation sector, where that equates today about 40% of our global greenhouse gas emissions. And then downstream with our equipment and our products and services that are sold, which equate to almost half of our footprint when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. So really, we can't just do what we need to in our own operations, because that wouldn't cover it. We really need to work upstream and downstream and really work together with our suppliers and our value chain partners to help get there. If I maybe just step away from the climate perspective, as Tetra Pak, we're one of the largest purchasers of wood fibers or paperboard in the world today, and we use those in our carton packages, which are essential for protecting food and transporting food around the world. And when it comes to our sourcing of our materials, we have really been at the forefront of putting in place chain of custody and responsible sourcing requirements. So we were one of the first to be able to say that we can offer 100% Forest Stewardship Council certified paperboard in all of our packages around the world. And really what that does is it sets for us conditions for what we need to do when it comes to looking at our sourcing practices and making those as responsible as possible. So we have chain of custody paperboard, and I think that's really been the first step. In addition to this, more recently, we have also set up a certification scheme for our polyethylene, the plastic layer that helps to keep the food fresh in our package. And we have a Bonsucro certification for all of that, which is all that comes from renewable and plant-based sources as well. The last piece that I'd like to really touch on, and I think this is probably the most relevant for the discussion today, Serkan and Volkan, is on circularity and on recycling. Tetra Pak today operates in something like over 160 countries around the world. And we take our responsibility seriously when it comes to addressing the huge amounts of waste and of resource usage that is happening in the different countries where we operate. But of course, if you think about this from a macro perspective, we see there being very many big differences in the infrastructure and the legislation depending on where you are in the world. Some countries like Japan, Korea, parts of Western Europe, parts of Canada, parts of Australia have pretty advanced waste management and collection infrastructure in the sense that it's organized with investments in collection, with a lot of emphasis on providing consumer behavior work on this, and there's legislation to support that there's going to be investment to be able to make sure that whatever is collected is actually recycled. In other parts of the world, this infrastructure for recycling is maybe not as advanced or not as developed as it needs to be, and that's where we see our role as a company to help incubate or spark or trigger, I guess is the right word, the investments needed to really drive better waste management practices and better recycling. So from our perspective, we have set some pretty ambitious goals when it comes to increasing our recycling performance in the markets, and it starts with the design of our package. And so our package today, as I mentioned, has is mainly paperboard. It's 70% responsibly sourced paperboard. And it also has this polyethylene layer, and in some cases has an aluminium layer to protect the food from light and oxygen, which helps it keep its shelf stability for longer than 6 months. So we have essentially 3 layers in our package, which all need to be sort of managed either together or individually. And so our ambition is to basically make the world's most sustainable food packaging. And what this means for us at Tetra Pak is that our carton packages should only be made solely from responsibly sourced, renewable or recycled materials, which can be fully recyclable and carbon neutral. And this is really our core ambition when it comes from the design stage, because we can't just only address the collection and recycling issues without addressing our package design from the start. And so our goal there is really to increase that renewable and recycled content. And so today, as I mentioned, 70% of our package portfolio on average is made from paperboard. And we would like to increase the amount of paperboard in our package, which would then help downstream in making the economics better to collect and recycle our package once it's been used by the consumer. And why is this important? Because we believe that by using renewable and responsibly sourced materials, we can actually minimize the need for fossil-based materials like more plastics, which also has a significant environmental benefit when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions and our goal in reaching our net zero greenhouse gas emissions target there. So that's really the core of this. And then when you look more further downstream, we are realizing our recycling ambition by working on a few key factors. So the design stage, which I think is the first element of our product, where we are setting a very ambitious target. We also need to work very closely with our recycling value chain partners, and here there's a full ecosystem of partners we need to work with, right from municipalities and local authorities to work on collection systems to make sure those are efficient and actually are widespread across different geographies. We need to work with the collection and recycling industry. So also those who take our cartons, who sort them, who bale them, and get them prepared for the recycling markets. We have to work with different recyclers around the world, and today we work with something like 170 different recycling partners, and Volkan will talk a little bit about some of those in our region that we have today. And really, that value chain has to all work together, and we see our role as in this chain as sort of being the matchmaker, working with the municipalities and the collectors and matchmaking the volumes that they collect with the recyclers to make sure that those can all be recycled. And that's really sort of the strategy that we have. And if you look at some of the performance that we've had in terms of our recycling programs that we put in place today, we've increased the number of Tetra Pak cartons that are recycled since 2010 by 17 billion cartons across the world, and we've increased the number of markets that we work in by over 21 markets since 2010. And we've increased the number of recyclers by 130. And all of this is with a capital expenditure of something like 25 million euros that we have invested over the period from 2012 to 2020. And going forward, in order to really make that investment realized, to make our ambition realized, we are committing to invest around 100 million euros in R&D and in investments in the collection and recycling infrastructure over the next 5 to 10 years to be able to really move the needle where we need to be in terms of recycling. In addition to this, we have something like 70 full-time employees working around the world, specifically on collection and recycling. And I think that, again, just shows that, of course, from a macro perspective, that collection and recycling is absolutely critical for our business and for our license to operate. Maybe with that, I'd like to hand it over to Volkan to maybe guide us through some of the more local and regional practices we have when it comes to recycling.
Mustan, thank you very much. I took so many notes that it's really hard for me to reflect on all of them. But to begin with, the package saves more than its cost. It's a great motto that any industry really can acknowledge and try to use. At least the mentality behind it, principles behind it. So it's a great start. And when I looked at your presentation, there was a page linked with the SDGs, and you mentioned 14 of the 17 SDGs. And when the number of SDGs that a company is involved or taking care of is increasing, then we understand that their touch to the lives of the people is really increasing. And they are also taking care of every contact, every aspect of the SDGs, and trying to internalize them in their operations. And it's great that you are doing in many of them. And these targets, they're amazing targets. And when you take care of all 3 scopes, like 1, 2, and 3, and it's good that you connected it to the value chain approach, because what we are trying to show is how these big companies are changing their ecosystems and changing their value chains, so that global transition, global transformation would be probable and possible by including the small businesses or any other parties that are involved in these processes. So this perception, this perspective is quite important, and it brings us the question that who we are going to do with it. And then comes the partnerships that you stated very well. We are not alone in this one, and it is going to affect everyone within the value chain, including the customers also, as you very rightly mentioned. And the most important note I took from your presentation was the principle of providing the best legislation and infrastructure for the companies to accomplish these, to undertake these initiatives. And that is really important, because whenever we showcase these best practices, the place, the environment, the climate that these best practices also matters. And whenever a company or a country would like to renew these or implement these or own these, we really remind them that it is the underlying environment, the legislatory environment, and the infrastructure that is enabling these transitions. So that was a strong message. Thank you for highlighting this one. And sorry for interrupting, but there were so many highlights to reflect upon us that is exactly in line with Yaset's agenda on this topic. And by saying so, I'm giving the floor to Volkan. And Volkan, it was, I think, Tetra Pak's efforts to create a circular value chain in Turkey is quite a long history, as Mustan mentioned about the Tetra Pak's global initiatives. And I don't think it will be wrong to call them a success story. which definitely deserves a closer look. We would really appreciate to hear about your practices in Turkey and your vision about the things that you are going to do in the near future.
Thank you, Serkan Bey, and thank you, Mustan, for the brief summary, which encompasses a lot of different topics. But in the end, I think it's a clear message that how we are trying to look at this as a holistic area to explore and make sure that we are covering all areas. Otherwise, you always have some parts missing, and that causes funding loss, that causes time loss. And in the end, once we have to do all these at the same time, then everybody panics, and there's a chaos, as some of the cases that we have in Turkey, unfortunately, at the moment. So we are trying to be proactive in all our activities, make sure that we are connecting with the right partners, strong partners. And by strong, I don't mean financially only, mentally strong partners, which is very important because they should have the same focus as we do and chase the same targets as we do. Otherwise, it's always a journey where you go back and forth, waltzing back and forth with the partners, and nothing just comes out. So, what we want to do is to really find the right partners who are interested in this topic and expand together with us, because it's a win-win situation for all of us. You're talking about a value chain establishment and maintenance. This can be done with only one sole company's interest and pushing all the time. So we want to have partners that want to work with us actively. So in order to give set the scene for the recycling value chain development efforts of Tetra Pak, I'll start with the global vision at the moment. Globally, we have been working with recycling partners where we have technical collaborations, financial collaborations, and to make sure that these facilities are fed well and there is no interruption in the business, we try to explore all areas of the value chain. So anybody in the system benefits from this to keep this going for a long time without being supported by us all the time, by the industry all the time, because this is now a huge business. Waste management business is really huge, and it's in Turkey. It's advancing very well, very fast at the moment. You can say it's closer to European standards in terms of applications on the collection side, sorting side, and especially recyclability and value creation from these secondary raw materials. So we are in the right track. And looking at the financial economic infrastructure and the status of the country at the moment, these materials are very valuable, and very soon we'll see that shortages of recycled materials being able to use in applications, because we know how natural resources are depleting all the time. And that means recycled content at some point, when everybody has the same type of interest, will be another challenge for us. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Then we'll get to, we'll solve that at that time. But this is how it looks. So if you look at this map here, this is our latest official figures. On the right side, we were able to recycle 49 billions of packages across the globe with our recycling partners, which are over 170, and it's increasing at the moment, because when you look at this map, you see a lot of empty areas that we need to populate, because logistics is a very huge factor. And if we can have right facilities in the right places, then recycling and creating new values from waste becomes a lot more difficult. So this is the current situation, and it's increasing every day. So it might be even a little outdated, but this shows our approach here. So we have uh, several different types of recycling facilities. Some of them just recover fibers from our cartons, which is fully renewably resourced material from industrial applications, and a very good quality fibers that is useful for a lot of paper industries, even comparable to cellulose, virgin cellulose. And you can have a sense of about the cost of these materials. virgin cellulose, and recycled beverage cartons, Tetra Pak cartons. So this is becoming a higher interest for a lot of stakeholders, future ones. But we also have other applications, like our package consists of several layers, which is polyethylene and aluminum at the moment. And we have to make sure that all these materials are recycled well and at 100% whenever we have the infrastructure and the material to collect, the feed these facilities. So this is what we want to do: create a map that we can use as recycling hubs in some points, because when we have the recycling facilities, we have to use the existing ones. But in the end, just the sake of preventing any issue from banning waste imports and exports, which is a very hot topic at the moment, as you all know. We cannot rely on exports from other countries to feed these facilities, so they're utilized effectively. So we have to place in strategic locations collection and sorting infrastructure with, again, new partners. And looking at the second part of the map here, which is kind of a zooming in into our region, greater Middle East and Africa, since we have Pakistan, Afghanistan in there as well. We have a infrastructure, but compared to other regions, it's very weak, as you can see. Many areas are empty and no recycling facility at the point. Of course, this depends on the consumption of the material. Wherever you have high consumption, you have to establish something. But looking at this map, you see that we have already 16 recycling partners in different parts of the region. But our aim is to double that in the next 3 years, to make sure that all cartons are collected and recycled wherever we can reach them. Of course, there are some developments towards that. We are identifying new potential partners that are in paper industry, plastics recycling industry, or even plastics producers, so they can make the best value out of these recycled materials, which are practically and theoretically very good substitutes for a lot of raw materials. And we are open to sharing our know-how with other industries, our new recycling and collection partners, so they are at the same level of information that we are, and we can start working very fast on the next advancement levels and advancement steps. We are all When you look at the approach of Tetra Pak in the collection recycling system, we want to have a system that has the right partners in place and supporting all the markets that we are active in. And we are happy to be leading all these conversations with our potential business partners. We co-invest in capital equipment, because this is important. Some of the recycling partners we are approaching are not very well developed in the financial side, but they know the business. So we see the intersection points here and find out how we can support them. Then we set up a system with them and make sure that it works in terms of feasibility, in terms of money flow and material flow. So it's not only recycling investments. We go into collection activities. We go into sorting activities, because most of the collection is done with mixed type of collection at the moment. All packaging waste is mixed together, and they have to be separated well to increase the value of the recyclable. And looking at the demand for the end materials, we are again trying to increase the base of materials that is being sold across the industry. So we have to prove that these recycled materials and end products are valuable, comparable in cost, maybe saving some money for the buyers, and also the technical specifications should also meet all the requirements by our partners here. And government relationship is something that we value, because there is no legislation in any of these countries except for Turkey. There are some advancements in South Africa too, but they're very preliminary. So we want to make sure that our cartons are collected well in the system, and that our targets to collect these materials in the proper ways, in align with our targets, internal targets, because we have very ambitious targets to reach until the next 10 years. So we all connect all these dots here, and at the same time, we try to promote these by creating awareness projects, again with partners, because it's a multi-stakeholder business. But looking at the challenges, as I said, legislation is not there, so it's an informal sector we have to be in communication with and find out how they can support us. It's not an easy job, and also since it's done by the informal sector, quality is not very good. The financial balances are not there at the moment in some cases, so we have to make sure that this value chain brings value to all components of it. All links in the value chain should benefit from this. Otherwise, it's a business that's going to continue for a few years, maybe. Then again, we lose this value chain. And as you see, we are aiming to increase the capacity by twice, and we are achieving that at the moment. Some of the yellow parts here are showing, yellow points shown here are projects in development, and we want to make sure that these are turning into green and blue, which is green is for fiber recovery, and blue is for polyol, which is polyethylene aluminum layers in our cartons. So we have a complete solution for our cartons. 100% recyclability is very important for us. Moving on to the next one, which is a little more interesting for some of the audiences here. I think in Turkey we have a pretty good infrastructure thanks to our efforts in the last 5 years. We started with Kahramanmaraş. KMK Paper is one of the leading paper industries in the world, in the country, and now we have two lines working with them, and they recover 100% of our materials, and they create additional value from the value of the cartons, fibers, and all the plastics and aluminum content of it. We have another one, Viking Paper, a factory by Yashar Holding. Maybe some of you know. They started their own recycling plant, showing that there is an opportunity in tissue production from our cartons, which is done in some countries across the globe. So the line started up, and now we are trying to gather more waste for this company, for this plant. So the utilization rate of the plant's components are in an acceptable level. And looking at Afyon area, we have a third one. Now the installations are ongoing, and this is going to be able to take the polyol waste created by the Viking Paper, because they're not interested in any material except fibers. The polyol waste will be going into Afyon, and in Afyon we'll see that it's going to be going into different types of materials. I'll show you some examples in the next slides. So we have a system that is ready to support all collected tonnages in the country. So the bottleneck here is the collected amount. As we know, there's a system issue with the collection system, and very uncertainties in the system at the moment. We are trying to solve that with the government, with the Turkish Environment Agency, with some municipalities. It's a tough job to achieve, but it can be done. We believe in that. And since we have off-takers of these materials, which are paying for the material too, so that should be much more easier for us to complete the chain in Turkey. We have an awareness project countrywide called Zero Waste Education Project. We are doing that with the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Education, and also the Zero Waste team and the presidency. So we are working together with them. We are supporting financially this education system to see that our cartons are visible, are known that they are recyclable, and how to contribute to the recycling system by the consumer. So this is a countrywide project. We are trying to connect with that. So as you can see, it's a 360 approach that we have. We are trying to cover all stages. And as you see, the target is completed because we were trying to set up a system in capacity sufficient for the country, and we achieved that. Now we are waiting for the material to recycle. Maybe in the short time, we will have to import. We will have to be supported by the imports because there is no material, and these plants should line, thinking about the economical benefits that they are bringing to the country, and even with exports they are in a very good place. So we'll see that this system will be advancing a bit more in the next 2-3 years. Once we have a legislation that's supporting all these activities, then we can comfortably say that we have all the components. We just have to make that helva. That's all. So going into the next part uh, is the areas that we're working, and we are covering all the stakeholder groups in the system. Awareness projects are done by governmental institutions, municipalities, PROs. PROs are not in the system at the moment, unfortunately, but we still have connections with them. Brand owners are customers, licensed collection sorting companies. So awareness projects we run with them. Collection sorting activities, we are in connection with communicate collection sorting companies, energy production from organic waste or compost production companies. All of these we approached and visited. We see the situation on the field. And right now we know where to recover our materials. Since there is no separate sourcing at the waste production places, we have to make sure that we can reach all the material that is going to different types of the waste management system: landfills, bio-based, energy production facilities, packaging waste sorting plants. And also we are talking to RVM manufacturers because in the future we see that there's going to be a deposit system for our cartons as well. So we are in connecting with them to make sure that their machines take our cartons with no issues. Capacity building, as I mentioned recently, we are building capacity with our partners. It's a co-investment type of model, but it worked well up until so far. But we are still talking to universities, foreign investors to see how we can expand the system. There are interested foreign recyclers that wants to invest in Turkey for recycling. So that's something interesting for us. And with the universities, we have some R&D projects to maximize the value of our components of the packaging waste. And end product development is important too, because with the highest profits, end products will bring you additional value that you can distribute in the value chain. So the more value you get from the end materials, you can just reflect some of the earnings to the collection system and make it more interesting for the collection companies to collect. So this is kind of system that we are chasing as Tetra Pak. Looking at the carton recycling side, because I wanted to give you how the cartons are recycled. It's a very pretty easy process, to be honest. It's a regular paper production process with some small adjustments where we put our cartons, waste cartons, into a pulper, which is a big blender that mixes the cartons with the paper, and the end the pulp from our cartons are coming out separately, and the polyal waste, polyethylene aluminum waste, and also the caps, polypropylene and polyethylene caps in our cartons are separated as well. Then with the pulp, we can produce a lot of paper cores, cardboard, tissue paper, gypsum paperboard, which is a very value-added material that was invented in Turkey by using UBC. So that's a good advancement in our R&D efforts. And wherever you need high-strength fibers, you can just use our cartons once they're recycled. And the plastics and aluminum part gives us a lot of opportunities to develop new products. You see some of the types here, and we are still expanding the end users. So again, reflect the money, earned money to the recycling system, the overall system. And as you can see, the cartons are coming in, going into the pulping system. it's pulped, and the fibers and pulp is removed, and the remaining polyol waste is this. Then it goes into these kinds of materials. It can be with granule production. It can be with hot pressing, thermal pressing technology.
I guess Volkan is experiencing some connection problem right now, but he'll be with us shortly. And as he stated, this is really a basic process, and the establishment, all the investment is there. It's just a capacity that should be channeled to these infrastructures so that we can recycle more. And there was a very good point that he stated on the legislation that would enable the companies to fully allocate resources or fully enjoy using the capacity that is created by these investments. So, in the meantime, there was a
Yeah.
question channeled to us, Mustan. Maybe it would be proper to take your response on this one. We talked about the consumer behavior and said that some majority of the initiatives should be backed with this one. And this question is just asking the contribution of the consumers to decrease your footprint, like what percentage of the improvements are going to come by the change in this consumer behavior in your sector, or at least can you have an idea about the importance of the role that the consumers are playing in this field?
Yeah, it's a great question, Sirkan. And in fact, when I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that something like 1/3 of all global greenhouse gas emissions is from food systems, and
Mhm.
8% is from food waste and loss. And from my perspective, I think that consumers or the end user has a very significant role to play
Mhm.
in behavior or mindset changes to address food waste and loss.
Mhm.
We actually would like to do some research this year to
Mhm.
exactly quantify, to measure that gap about
Great.
what is that impact. And I would very much welcome whoever raised that question, an opportunity to speak a little bit more specifically about this. My feeling is that we can't put all of the emphasis on the consumer, because I think that us as industry and as big brands have a definitely a role to play in nudging or supporting
Mhm.
the consumer in making more sustainable choices. But the consumer definitely has the final say and in what they do. And so I do think that there is a significant opportunity, particularly related to food waste,
Mhm.
where we could see significant gains if we could work on behavior changes, mindset shifts, and potentially even some nudging types of projects together on marketing, responsible marketing from brands towards consumers.
Mhm. And this nudging emphasis is really important, Mustan. Thank you for reminding that one. And it also affects the design of the public policies in this field, so that the incentives are going to be targeted not only for the private sector but also for the consumers and change their behavior to do so. And we see that most of the impact can be achieved by changing the recycling or waste depositing practices, including the municipalities and also the people. If
Right.
they can just recycle rightly, then we are going to have more products that can feed your capacities that you establish, as Volkan stated. So we just take the liberty to benefit the time that you were reconnecting about a question, Volkan. Would you please continue your presentation?
Thank you. Sorry about the
Thank
technical
you, Mustan, for
issue.
your insights.
And can I see the slides again, please?
Sure. Sonuçu tekrar yansıtabilirsek arkadaşlar.
So as you can see, it's all about the value chain and finding the right partners. And we've been doing that in many areas, not only recycling. We have to find the ones that are willing to take the next step and walk the extra mile, because that's what we are doing. For example, I'm a manager, but I still go into the ground level and find out what kind of mixes I can create with polyol, and I just tried myself. So it's all about being in the mix and making sure that you're on the field, knowing actual things, and really it's a difficult business area to develop without being in that system, and you should be a part of the workforce. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is where we lost you, and you were talking about the aluminum part of this one.
So everybody says that the carton recycling, we call it carton recycling. We call it the beverage carton. It's mostly carton, as you know, and um, the main issue is not about the technology, because technology is there. We have several different technologies to create different types of materials. Depending on the need, and we're still advancing on the new technologies on that, together with solution providers from different countries. But again, in the end, you should find the most feasible way, most applicable way according to the country. So each country will have a different system for sure. So moving on to the next one, if I can somehow. Oh yeah, great. So I will tell you about some of the partnerships that we have in Turkey, since we started in 1990s to recycle cartons in Turkey, our cartons. There has been a set of recyclers that into mostly the preliminary and most comparably simpler way of recycling. Maybe you have seen it. It's pressing technology where produce panel boards, and it can be used in different applications, construction, furniture making, etc. But the needs are of the countries are changing. So the best value from the cartons comes from recovering the fiber, because, as I said, it's comparable to cellulose, and the people must really like it, and the interest is expanding globally. So the first one is KMK Paper. It's based in Kahramanmaraş. They have two factories of paper mill and one box producing factory, and you see some of the end products they produce with our cartons. So they see the value of the fibers in it, and it's superior to OCC in many cases, which is um, cartons that are usually seen, the fluted corrugated cartons. It's the quality and the specifications are higher, so they are using it in strong materials that needs and that extra durability. And looking at the second part is Viking Paper in Izmir, as I said, a subsidiary of Yashar Holding, a sister company of Pınar Milk. And this is again as something of like a circular economy model we are trying to create at the moment. Because Pınar Milk use these cartons, and their sister company needs the cartons to recycle. So we worked on that together for the last 2 years, and now it's in operation. The quality of the tissue paper, as you can see, some types here, they're very good. They started exporting to Europe. They started introducing the brown tissue paper into Turkey, because, as you know, there's a consumer perception that the brown paper is not as hygienic. They go for white paper, but in the end, it's the same thing, the same type of hygiene, and it's all about marketing, I think. And we'll be working on that together with them to see how we can expand this, because it's made from the local raw materials instead of importing cellulose to produce these. And it's going to bring a lot of value for the recycler. And there are two more recycling partners waiting for us from the paper industry to go into this. But we just tell them, okay, there's not enough waste material in the country. We should work on that first, then you can go into it. So the interest is rising. And the polyol part, as I said, polyethylene aluminum, that's been a headache for a long time, but now we have a lot of solutions across the globe, and we are trying to expand the operation. So you see, this is a plant again in Kahramanmaraş paper, KMK paper. We introduced a cleaning line and also the extrusion line into their facilities so they can produce these granules, which are called polyol granules, which is different from regular granules because it has small specks of aluminum in it because we don't separate it. But you look at the examples, it still can be used, it still can bring some value. And we are now talking about using these pallets in our own operations to send our packaging material and take it back. So that's a project that's been working on in Turkey. And this is going to be a very interesting one because it's a part of a circular economy model. Of course, circular economy means bottle to bottle, but again, this to me kind of circular.
Yeah.
All I can say. But our aim is to, of course, use recycled materials, like cartons as well, in the very future, very near future. So we'll be maybe giving some more information about that once things are more clear. But there are many opportunities to use these, and we are talking to our customers, suppliers, like supermarket chains, how we can replace those. So R&D work continues. We talk to a lot of plastics producers to find out the right materials to use as polymer. And the third one is the third recycler. The second one here is a third recycler that's coming into play. Can we go back one more? One more. The previous one. Yeah. Yeah. So this is a plant that is going to start operating in June, and it's producing those panels that you can see. Maybe I can make it bigger. No, I can't. So these panels can be used instead of OSB, instead of plywood, instead of the MDF types of wood products, and they are more durable to weather conditions. They don't deteriorate because there is polymer in it, and it removes it prevents the water soaking properties of the material. So looking at the park and recreation type of furniture and the roof tiles, maybe a cheaper alternative to existing roof tiles will be produced in Turkey this year, and we want to expand this to many applications. So again, the end market development is in our core. We make sure that our recyclers are selling at a good price and find the right products to sell it. So it's all about completing the value chain.
Mhm.
And the last slide I'll show you, I'm almost out of time, but almost over time. So next slide, I just want to talk to you about the future of the carton package. So our aim is to produce a carton that is solely from renewable or recycled packaging materials, 100% recyclable and going into regular collection streams without any issues. And fitting to a low carbon circular economy, we are in a very good place about low circular economy because how we carry our packages, how we deliver it, etc. And the logistics side, we are very advantageous according to other packaging types. But again, we are still trying to increase our efficiency in the low carbon circular economy models. So the circular economy, just to emphasize, circular economy means using the materials over and over in the same system, but it should be low carbon. You cannot just go to send some waste material from Turkey to Canada and expect it to be a low carbon circular economy. So
Mhm.
it has its own effects. So that's what we are trying to eliminate at the same time. And of course, we don't want to compromise any of the food safety requirements for sure. So this is all I have to say for this session.
Volkan, thank you very much. It was really enlightening, and maybe 2 points that we can take out of this one is there is much to achieve, but the key actions are taken, and it's clear that Tetra Pak has a clear strategy, and it's just on the implementation stage. The roadmap is there, and you are progressing with sure steps to the target by changing the ecosystem and all your value chain. And the enabling environment is also improvement, including the legislation and the infrastructure. And also, as we spoke before you rejoined, the consumers are within this solution domain, that their changed behavior is going to contribute a lot. And the second point is You mentioned the technology is there. There was a recent research saying that the 85% of the emission reductions that are targeted by the global consensus are achievable through the available technologies. It is just the optimal usage of it. And you stated it very correctly that the context of the countries may differ and solutions may differ. But again, we have a extending solution set. Thanks to you, these international companies that are operating in very different domains with different resources, the different legislatory environment, that you are bringing up the alternative solutions to the countries. We really appreciate for this one. And though it is not 100% circular, it is being optimized as we understood, and the target is there that we saw in your last slide, and we wish you luck to achieve this target sooner than you set. Though the targets you set are quite ambitious, but we saw the capacity and will and the resources behind that. Thank you very much, Volkan. And before we conclude, I would like to give the final word to Mustan to receive his final remarks about this topic. And again, thank you very much for your contributions.
Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Serkan. I really appreciate this and giving us this opportunity. Maybe just to conclude, a couple reflections I had that also I think you summarized very well as well. Number one, in order for us to really scale and achieve the ambitions that we have, we need to work in partnerships. And I think this platform that you've put together under the auspice of YASED is an incredible opportunity to work very locally on things. And so I would very much welcome that opportunity to see how we can work more concretely with your members, also with your stakeholders, including the governments. And that leads to my second point, which is the governments are absolutely critical in putting in place enabling legislation. As a company, we see legislation as much as a threat as more of an opportunity if it's put in place in the right way. And I would very much encourage a two-way or potentially even multi-stakeholder dialogue to understand better, what are the priorities of policymakers, particularly in Turkey, but also obviously in other parts of the world, and really to see how can we work together on sort of co-creating that enabling legislation to achieve these broad sustainability agendas. And my final point here is you mentioned a little bit, or we mentioned also, this value chain approach. And I think it's no longer enough, and I hope that was evident in some of the goals that we had, that to just focus on our own operations and our own business. I think we need to for us and others, need to go much farther beyond and look upstream and downstream in the value chain, including suppliers, customers, industry partners, and also, very importantly, consumers, because they have a very critical role in helping to make the sustainability transition a reality. So maybe I'll stop there and give it back to you, Serkan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And as all of our webinars under this Sustainable Development Platform are ours, these webinars lead to more action and more cooperation. Thanks to this participatory approach, and I appreciate your focus on the partnerships and working with the wider stakeholder base to make a greater impact and in time. Thank you very much. It was really enlightening, and we appreciate your support and efforts in this field. It was a pleasure having you, Mustan. Volkan, thank you very much.
Thank you. And just one last
Please,
word.
Volkan, please.
You talked about synergies and joint efforts. We already started that in Turkey, for example, with different industries, tobacco industry or wood industry, to see what kind of collaborations we can do. And we're not even going to them proposing something. Once they hear about our efforts, they come to us and find a common solution, because most of the solution they are looking for are going through the same path. We just have to connect those dots and make sure that we are benefiting from our experiences, and we are fully open to that. It can be a different industry, even construction industry, as we mentioned, if we can make those collaborations faster and stronger, that's going to help us a lot.
Mhm. Great, and it also brings another responsibility for us. We'll try to make this stream reach as a wide audience as possible so that new partnerships can foster. Thank you very much. Stay safe and healthy, and stay in our
You too.
network. We'll be in touch. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.